sat in the middle of the biology classroom on Prime, looking at the massive wall screens that showed images of dangerous creatures from across the galaxy. Around him, students from a dozen different species shifted in their seats. They sat tall and still, their forearms folded in front of them. They huddled together, their soft bodies trembling slightly. A few human exchange students sat near, nervous about what was coming. Professor stood at the front of the room. He was one of the oldest and most respected teachers on the station. His blue skin had deep markings that showed his status and his centuries of teaching. His eyes, large and black as space itself, fixed on his students with an intensity that made even the brave ones uncomfortable. "Today," Professor said in his deep, rumbling voice, "we study fear. Fear is the mechanism that keeps all living things alive. Without fear, we do not survive. Fear makes us run from danger. Fear makes us protect our young. Fear is evolution's greatest gift to us." He turned toward the screen and gestured with two of his four hands. "I will play sounds from the most dangerous predators in the known galaxy. These sounds have shaped entire civilizations. They have driven species to build walls, weapons, and alliances. They are the sounds of death itself." The classroom fell silent. Even the nervous students stopped moving. Professor played the first recording. It was the call of a leviathan, a creature that lived in the deep seas of a distant water world. The sound was wrong. It did not fit in the ears of land-dwelling creatures. It was too low, too wide, as if the sound itself wanted to swallow the listener whole. Several students made soft, crying sounds. The next recording was worse. A hunting call of a pack predator from the outer territories. This sound was sharp and immediate. It was the sound of something fast, something that did not waste time, something that killed quickly and moved on to the next prey. Watched his classmates react. A student from the species, something small and insect-like, had covered its sensory organs. The young in the class seemed pleased by the sounds, their pupils opening wider, their breathing becoming faster. "Fear," Professor continued, "is not weakness. Fear is honest. Fear tells us the truth about the world. We are alive because our ancestors were afraid. They ran, they hid. They learned to read danger." He stepped back from the control panel. "The final recording is from Earth. It is the roar of a creature that no longer exists in the wild. But its sound was so powerful that humans created weapons to destroy it rather than learn to live with it. This is the roar of the Terran alpha predator, a creature that hunted other creatures for thousands of years." Felt his shoulders relax. He had heard this sound before. His grandfather had played old Earth recordings for him, stories of the ancient world. This was not new to him. Professor played the sound. It was a roar that came from the deep chest of a massive creature. It was powerful. It was dangerous. It spoke of teeth and claws and hunger that had no end. The sound filled the room like a living thing, pressing against every student, demanding fear, demanding respect. Half the class made sounds of distress. Several students trembled visibly. One young closed their eyes and tried to make themselves smaller. And then laughed. It was not a nervous laugh. It was not a scared laugh that people make when they are trying to hide terror. It was a real laugh, a true laugh, the kind that comes from something funny and unexpected and wrong in all the right ways. The sound stopped. Every eye in the classroom turned toward. The students stared at him like he had done something impossible. They looked at him like he had broken a law of the universe. Professor's massive body went very still. "Is something amusing?" Professor's voice was not angry, but it was not friendly either. Controlled his laughter and sat up. "I am sorry, Professor. I did not mean to be disrespectful." "That is not an answer," Professor said. "I asked what was amusing about the most dangerous sound in this sector of space." Thought for a moment. He could lie. He could say he was nervous and his body was reacting strangely. He could apologize and move on, but he had always been taught to be honest. His mother had always said that truth was better than comfort. "That sound," said calmly, "is not very scary." The classroom made sounds of shock. Several students made aggressive clicking noises. "Not scary?" Professor's voice dropped lower. "The Terran alpha predator caused its own species to develop weapons that could destroy entire civilizations. Humans feared this creature so much that they killed it until none remained. You tell me this is not scary?" Nodded slowly. "Yes, Professor, I have heard Scarier." Professor waited for it to explain further. When said nothing more, the professor leaned forward slightly. What could possibly be scarier than the sound of an apex predator that inspired a species to commit genocide against another species? Looked at the screen where the predator's image still hung. It was big, it was strong. It had teeth and claws, but it was alone, it hunted alone. "I have heard Scarier," repeated. Professor did not respond immediately. He simply stood there, his massive frame silhouetted against the screen. Behind him, the image of the ancient Earth predator looked small and simple. "Class is dismissed," Professor finally said. "Everyone except should leave." As the other students packed their things and moved toward the door, they cast looks at that were mixture of fear, respect, and confusion. The students seemed insulted. The seemed relieved to escape the tension. When the door closed and Professor were alone, the teacher did something unexpected. He turned off the screen and sat down on the edge of his desk. This brought him down to only twice height instead of 3 times. "Explain yourself," Professor said simply. Took a deep breath. "I am not trying to be disrespectful, Professor. That predator was strong and fast and dangerous, but it was only one kind of danger. That is why humans are not very afraid of it anymore. We know how to fight it. We know how to survive it." "And what else should we fear?" Professor asked. Looked at his teacher. In the stark eyes, he saw genuine curiosity, not anger. The Galactic Council chamber was a massive circular room built into the center of Prime's orbital station. The walls climbed up at least 50 meters, and representatives from 43 different species occupied seats arranged in rings around the center platform. At the top, in a position of honor, sat the oldest members of the council. They had guided the galaxy through wars, famines, and the discovery of new worlds. Stood in the center of the platform. He was alone except for Professor, who stood slightly behind him. The professor had explained nothing about why they were here or what would happen. They had simply walked through transport tubes and entered this chamber where hundreds of alien eyes now focused on a single human. Counselor stood from his seat. He was the highest ranking on the council, and his blue skin was marked with thick golden stripes that showed his status. He was old, at least 400 years old by human counting. He had seen species rise and fall. He had made decisions that affected billions of lives. "A human stands before us who claims that the roar of an apex predator is not frightening," Counselor announced. His voice echoed through the chamber. "This human laughed at a sound that would make most species tremble. This is either arrogance or foolishness. The Council wants to know which one it is." Felt the weight of all those eyes upon him, but he did not feel fear. He felt something else. He felt responsibility. He understood that his words would shape how the galaxy saw his entire species. "I am not arrogant," said clearly. "And I am not trying to fool anyone. The sound was dangerous, but I have heard scarier things." "What scarier things?" This was a question from Ambassador Lore, a representative. She was smaller than most of the other council members, and her voice was gentle, but her question was direct. Took a moment to answer. He wanted his words to be true. He did not want to exaggerate or lie. "My species comes from a planet called Earth. The climate there is harsh. The weather is violent. The creatures are many and varied, but these are not the scariest things about Earth." Counselor leaned forward. "Then what is scariest?" "The unpredictability," said. "The things that have no form, the hunger that comes from not having enough food, the cold that kills slowly, the disease that cannot be seen but destroys everything. These things do not roar, they do not attack with teeth and claws, but they have killed more humans than any predator ever could." The chamber grew louder. Some representatives clicked and hissed. Others made sounds of doubt. A few leaned toward their neighbors and spoke in low voices. Counselor raised one of his massive hands, and the chamber became silent again. "You claim that invisible threats are scarier than a predator that can hunt you, but invisible threats are not threats that a species can face directly. How does your species survive such things?" Nodded. "By adapting, by learning, by accepting that some things cannot be controlled, only survived." "This is philosophy," said a representative from the species, a creature of chittering sounds and quick movements. "It is not proof. We have heard many philosophies. We need evidence. We need to know if humans are simply speaking pretty words or if they have real strength." Ambassador Lore stood up. "I propose that we test the human's claim. If his species truly faces scarier things than we know, then we should learn from them. If he is lying, then we know that humans are not to be trusted." Counselor considered this. "And how would we conduct such a test?" "Allow the human to show us. Ambassador Lore said. "Give him access to our archives and our recording systems. Let him show us what is scarier than what we already fear. Then we can judge for ourselves." The chamber erupted in discussion again. Some council members liked this idea. Others thought it was a waste of time. Some wanted to dismiss immediately and ban all humans from visiting Prime. But Counselor was the most respected voice in the chamber. When he stood again, everyone listened. "We will grant this test," they said. "We'll have access to the archives. He will have one rotation, 25 hours, to gather and present his evidence. If he can show us something scarier than what we already know, then humans will earn a place of honor in the Galactic Council. If he cannot, then humans will be labeled as frauds, and this station will be closed to your kind forever." Felt the weight of that statement. It was not just about him. It was about every human in the galaxy. It was about the future of his entire species. "I accept this test," said simply. Over the next hours was led to the archive by a small robot guide. The archive was a vast library of recordings, images, and data collected over thousands of years. It contained the history of entire species, the records of wars and peace, the documentation of every known danger in the galaxy. Searched through records of Earth. He found the old scientific records. He found videos from before the space age, recordings of humans filmed by accident or by intent. He found footage of hurricanes and tornadoes. He found recordings of volcanic eruptions that shook entire islands. He found footage of animals that the modern world had forgotten: sharks with teeth like daggers, bears with strength that could crush bones, snakes with venom that killed in minutes. But he also found something else. He found the harder things to watch. He found footage of human suffering, starvation, disease, the silent killing of cold winters when food ran out. He found recordings of children crying without hope, of mothers who could not feed their young, of entire communities destroyed by simple hunger. These recordings did not have the drama of a predator's roar. They did not have the intensity of a creature's attack. But they had something else. They had the weight of suffering that could not be fought, only endured, stood on the presentation platform in the Galactic Council chamber once again. The chamber was full this time. Every seat was occupied. Representatives had come from distant sectors just to hear what a human would say about fear. Word had spread through the station, and even lower-ranking officials had found places to stand along the walls. The screens behind were dark and ready. He had chosen 25 recordings from the archive. Each one showed a different aspect of what Earth had been and what had made humanity what it was. "Thank you for allowing me this time," began. His voice was steady and calm. "I will not make false claims. I will not try to trick anyone. I will show you what I have found, and you can judge for yourselves." He gestured, and the first image appeared on the screen. It was a photograph from Earth, before humans had developed the technology to leave their world. It showed a coastline with massive waves, each one taller than a human building. "This is a hurricane," said. "It is a storm that forms over water. It can move faster than a person can run. It can destroy everything in its path. Humans had no way to stop it. They could only run or hide." The image changed. Now it showed the damage. Buildings were torn apart. The ground was covered with debris. There was nothing standing that had not been broken. "But a hurricane stops," continued. "It passes. After it passes, humans rebuild." The next images were different. They showed the inside of a human body ravaged by disease. The images were not beautiful. They were honest about how much pain and suffering a human could endure. "This is what plague looks like," said. "This is what hunger looks like. This is what cold looks like when it kills someone slowly. My species has faced all of these things, many times, for thousands of years." Counselor watched without expression, but could see that the old was paying close attention. The recordings continued. Volcanoes that erupted and buried entire cities in ash. Earthquakes that leveled mountains. Predators that hunted humans. Great cats with claws like knives. Bears with teeth that could crush bone. Reptiles that moved faster than thought. But then played something different. He played a recording of a human child screaming, not in fear of a predator, but in pain from sickness. He played recordings of humans standing in snow, freezing, knowing they would die if they stayed where they were, but having no choice. He played a recording of a human mother holding a dead child, just holding the child and not moving, not speaking, just the silence of loss. The chamber had become very quiet. No one was clicking or hissing or making sounds of doubt anymore. They were simply watching and listening. These are the things that haunted my species for thousands of years, said. Not roars, not attacks, but the slow knowledge that we might not survive, that our children might not survive, that everything we built could be destroyed by forces we could not control. He paused and looked directly at Counselor. And my species learned something important from this, continued. We learned that fear can paralyze you, or fear can teach you. We learned that the things that do not roar are often more dangerous than the things that do. We learned that survival is not about being the fastest or the strongest. It is about being stubborn enough to keep trying even when everything tells you to stop. Gestured again, and a new set of images appeared. These showed humans doing things, building shelter, creating fire, farming crops, caring for the sick, teaching the young. Simple things. But in each image there was determination. There was the refusal to accept defeat. This is what fear taught us, said. To be clever, to plan, to work together, to never accept that something is impossible just because it is hard. Ambassador Lore spoke from her seat. You suggest that fear is not something to avoid. You suggest that fear is a teacher. Yes, said. Fear tells you what matters. My species learned that the things we feared most were not monsters. They were failure. They were the failure to protect our young, the failure to survive, the failure to build something that would last. These fears drove us to become better, stronger. Not stronger in the way a predator is strong, but stronger in the ways that matter. Counselor stood. The chamber became silent immediately. I hear what you are saying, they said. But words are easy. Many species have learned to speak well. What I do not understand is why a human would laugh at the roar of an apex predator if it had spent its evolution running from danger. Laughter is what comes from confidence. But where does a species that lives in fear find confidence? Took a breath. He had been waiting for this question. A species finds confidence in having faced the worst and survived it, said. My species did not just face danger. We faced danger every single day for thousands of years. We faced hunger and disease and cold and predators. We faced them so many times and survived so many times that we learned something important. Danger is not as scary as the fear of danger. Once you have actually faced the thing you are afraid of and lived through it, the fear loses its power. He stepped forward on the platform. They learned to fear humans in this room because of what happened on a planet 2 systems over. They learned to fear because of an ancient attack. But my species did not learn to fear things that roar. We learned to fear things we could not predict, things we could not control. And in learning that, we learned that most of what we fear never comes to pass. We learned that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is doing what must be done even though you are afraid. The chamber erupted in sound again, but this time it was different. There was less skepticism and more genuine debate about what it said. Counselor raised his hand again for silence. You speak well, human, they said. But the council does not work on words alone. We work on proof, on evidence that claims are real. Therefore, I make an offer. We will place you in a testing arena. A predator will be unleashed, set to its natural hunting mode. You will face it alone. If you can stand before this creature without fear, then we will know that what you say is true. If you show fear, then we will know that your words are hollow. Felt his heart increase its pace. He had not expected this, but he realized as soon as the offer was made that he had been expecting it all along. This was how the galaxy worked. Words meant nothing, only actions meant something. The containment arena was a vast underground chamber. Its walls were made of reinforced materials that could withstand the impact of weapons or the teeth of the most dangerous creatures alive. The floor was natural stone, carved to look like an outdoor landscape. There were rocks and small hills. There was even a pool of water in one corner. It was designed to make a predator feel like it was hunting in a real environment. Stood at the entrance to the arena. Around him, in transparent observation chambers, sat the members of the Galactic Council and hundreds of other observers who had come to watch this test. They had cameras trained on every part of the arena. They had medical equipment ready. They had weapons charged just in case. An official approached. She wore the blue uniform of the station's security force. The predator is a male, 10 years old in its prime hunting age, she said in a professional voice. It has been trained to hunt and kill, but it will be under our control. If you show signs of serious injury, we will stop the test immediately. Do you understand? I understand, said. The predator will be released when you enter the arena, the official continued. You will be alone with it for 1 hour. That is the full test. Survive 1 hour and the council will accept your claim. Die in the first minute and your species will be marked as frauds. Nodded. He did not need her to explain what failure would mean. He had understood that from the moment Counselor made the offer. The official gestured, and a massive door in the arena wall began to open. Beyond it could see the rocky landscape. He could see the pool of water. He could see the sun simulated by light panels in the ceiling of the arena. "Good luck," the official said. "For what it is worth, I do not think you will survive, but I respect your choice to try." Walked into the arena. The door closed behind him. He heard the heavy sound of it locking. There was no going back now. He stood for a moment, feeling the false sun on his skin, feeling the stone beneath his feet. The arena was warm, designed to match the climate of Prime. But it also smelled like Prime, a mixture of salt water and strange vegetation. Then he heard the sound. It was not a roar, it was quieter than that. It was the sound of movement. That had been released somewhere else in the arena. It was hunting now, it was tracking scent. Closed his eyes for a moment. He thought of Earth. He thought of the stories his grandfather had told him about humans who had lived in wild places. Humans who had hunted and been hunted. Humans who had learned to read the land and understand the animals that shared it with them. He opened his eyes and started walking. Not running, not panicking. Just walking slowly toward one of the higher rocks in the arena. As he climbed, he did not make noise. He did not disturb the stone. He moved like someone who had done this before, even though he had never done this before. From his higher position, he could see across the arena. And there, moving through a gap between stones, he saw the predator. It was massive. It was at least 3 meters long, not counting its tail. Its muscles rippled under its blue skin. Its eyes were yellow and intelligent. Its teeth were visible in a half-open mouth, white and sharp as anything had ever seen. The predator stopped moving. It had caught his scent or his sight. Its ears rotated forward, focusing on its direction. For a moment, they stared at each other across the arena. The predator was probably wondering what this strange, small creature was doing in its hunting ground. The predator was probably used to prey that ran, that panicked, that made mistakes. Did not run. He sat down on the rock calmly, as if he was not even aware of the predator's presence. This seemed to confuse the creature. It moved closer, slowly, cautiously. The predator was intelligent. It knew that something was wrong. A prey animal did not sit calmly in the open. A prey animal ran or hid or fought. Watch the predator approach. His heart was beating fast, but he controlled his breathing. He did not show fear. Fear was a thing that lived in the body, in the muscles and the sweat, and the way a person moved. If could control his body, he could control the fear. The predator came within 10 meters of the rock. It circled around the base, testing different angles, looking for a way to attack, but had chosen the rock carefully. It was steep on all sides. The predator could not climb it quickly, and was faster than the predator, just not in a long run across open ground. The predator made a sound, not a roar, something smaller, a chirp or a call. It was a hunting call, a way of communicating with other that prey had been found. But there were no other in the arena. The predator was alone. "I know you are scared," said. He said this in a calm voice, not shouting, not panicking, just speaking as if he was talking to someone who understood him. "I am scared too, but we are both alive right now. We can both keep being alive if we do not do something foolish." The predator did not understand his words, but it understood his tone. The human was not fleeing. The human was not attacking. The human was doing something that no prey did. The human was staying calm. The predator circled the rock again. It was frustrated. It was hungry. It wanted to hunt. But something about this situation was wrong. The prey was too confident. The prey was too calm. The sun tracked across the sky. 1 hour became 40 minutes. Sat on the rock and did not move. The predator prowled and did not stop trying to climb. Sometimes it roared, a sound that echoed through the arena. Sometimes it made hunting calls. Sometimes it simply stared at with those yellow eyes. When 30 minutes remained, something changed. The predator stopped circling. It climbed back down from the rock base and moved away. It did not walk far, it just found a spot where it could see and lay down. The predator was waiting. It had learned something important in its young life. This prey would not flee, this prey would not make a mistake. So the predator's best strategy was to wait. Maybe hunger would drive down, maybe would make an error when the sun grew lower. But did not move, and did not panic as the remaining time ticked away. When the hour was finished, an alarm sounded through the arena. The doors opened, stood up slowly. He looked down at the predator, which rose to its feet but did not advance. "Thank you," said to the creature. "You taught me something important today. You taught me that true predators are patient. They understand that not every hunt needs to be violent. Sometimes survival is just about waiting longer than the other person." 3 rotation cycles had passed since walked out of the containment arena. The entire galaxy knew about what had happened. News had spread from Prime to the furthest outposts of known space. A human had faced an apex predator and had not run. He had not fought. He had simply survived by understanding something that most species had forgotten, that true strength was not about winning through force. True strength was about patience and control, and the refusal to show fear even when fear lived inside you. The Galactic Council had held emergency sessions. Some members argued that humans should be given a seat of honor. Others wanted to study humans more before making such a decision. But Counselor had made his position clear. Humans had proven themselves worthy. They had earned the right to be part of the greater galaxy. Now stood in his new office at the Galactic Education Center. The office was on the middle levels of the main building, a place with high ceilings and walls that looked out toward the distant stars. On his desk was a formal notice from the Council. He was now an official ambassador and teacher for the human species. His job was to help other species understand humanity and to help humans understand the galaxy. There was a knock on his door. When said the word to open it, a tall figure entered. It was Counselor. The old filled the doorway. He was so large that the ceiling of the human-sized office seemed too low for him, but he folded himself into a posture that fit the space. He sat across from his desk, his massive frame somehow making the room seem smaller and larger at the same time. "I wanted to congratulate you privately," Counselor said. His voice was still deep and powerful, but it was softer than it had been in the council chamber. "What you accomplished in the arena was remarkable." "Thank you," said, "but I did not accomplish anything special. I simply remained calm." Counselor made a sound that might have been amusement. "Remaining calm is not simple when a predator is hunting you. I have seen trained warriors panic in the arena. I have seen species that were evolved for fighting lose control. But you did not." The old looked out the window toward the stars. When he spoke again, his voice was different. It was reflective, like he was remembering something from a long time ago. "My species has always believed that strength comes from fear," Counselor said. "A mother teaches her cubs to embrace fear. She teaches them to use fear to make them faster and deadlier. For thousands of years, this has made us the dominant predators in our region of space. But something changed in the last centuries. We stopped growing. We stopped learning. We simply maintained what we had." He turned to look at directly. "Your species showed us something we had lost," the Counselor continued. "You showed us that fear is not an enemy to embrace. Fear is a teacher. And the greatest lesson it teaches is that the world is not yours to conquer. The world is something you must learn to live within. You must adapt. You must grow, or you will die." Listened carefully. He understood that Counselor was sharing something important. "I was wrong to test you in the arena," Counselor said. "I was testing you the way my species tests everything, with violence. But what you taught me in that arena was that some tests cannot be passed through strength. Some tests can only be passed through wisdom." The old stood. He had to bend his head to avoid hitting the ceiling. "I am too old to change," Counselor said. "But my children will learn from what you have shown us. And perhaps in a few generations, my species will be stronger not because we can roar louder, but because we can understand deeper." After the Counselor left, sat in his office alone. He thought about Earth. He thought about his grandfather's stories. He thought about humans facing hurricanes and disease and starvation and always pushing forward. The next cycle began teaching his first class. It was held in a large lecture hall. Students from a dozen different species filled the seats. There were young, curious about the humans who did not fear them. There were who were nervous but eager to learn. There were members of species that had never heard of before. He stood at the front of the hall and waited for the room to become silent. "I want to talk about fear," began. "But I do not want to talk about fear the way most people do. I do not want to talk about the fear of predators or the fear of weapons or the fear of death. Instead, I want to talk about the fear that comes from hope." The students leaned forward. They were paying attention. "My species learned something important," continued. "We learned that the most terrifying thing in the universe is not death. Death is simple, death is final, but hope is terrifying. Hope is terrifying because it makes you believe that things can change, that you can survive, that tomorrow might be better than today. Hope demands that you act. Hope demands that you try. Hope demands that you refuse to accept that something is impossible. Walked along the front of the lecture hall. When you fear a predator, you can run, he said. You can fight, you can hide. But when you fear failure, when you fear that your hope might be empty, the only solution is to move forward anyway. You have to act despite your fear. You have to believe despite your doubt. You have to hope even when hope seems foolish. The class was completely silent. This is what Earth taught my species, said. Not how to hunt, not how to win, but how to survive things that cannot be won against, how to adapt to change, how to build something that lasts even when everything around us is trying to tear it down. As weeks passed, class became famous. Students from higher levels came to listen. Council members attended. Even some military officers sat in the back of the lecture hall listening. One rotation cycle at the end of class, counselor entered the hall. He was not alone. He brought with him a young, probably 20 years old by human counting. The young was nervous, his yellow eyes scanning the room like he was in a combat zone. Counselor introduced the young as his grandson. He explained that the grandson had volunteered to study with. The grandson wanted to understand humans better. He wanted to learn what it meant to face fear and move forward anyway. Smiled at the young. Welcome, said. My first real student from your species, I am honored. Over the following years, reputation grew. Humans were invited to serve on the Galactic Council. Human scientists contributed to major research projects. Human soldiers trained alongside warriors from a dozen different species. And most importantly, human teachers taught the galaxy about something that many civilizations had forgotten, that strength is not always loud. Sometimes strength is quiet. Sometimes strength is the refusal to show fear even when fear is real. Never forgot the moment in Professor's classroom when he had laughed at the predator sounds. That moment had changed his life. But more importantly, it had changed the way the galaxy saw humans. He had proven that humans were not the strongest species. They were not the fastest. They did not have the most advanced weapons or the longest. But humans had something that could not be taught or given. Humans had the ability to face the worst that existence could offer and to keep moving forward anyway. In his final years of teaching, when was old and his hair was gray, a student asked him why he had laughed in that classroom on the first day. Thought about the question carefully before answering. I laughed, said, because I suddenly understood that my species had survived thousands of years of real danger. We had faced things that would have destroyed any other species, but we kept surviving, we kept building, we kept hopping. And in that moment when I heard the roar of the most powerful predator the galaxy knew about, I realized that sound had never truly frightened us. We had always faced scarier things. We had always known that the universe was not kind. So hearing one creature roar was like hearing an old story that we had already learned the ending to. The student nodded, understanding something deep about the human experience. Walked home that rotation cycle through the corridors of Prime under the false stars that had replaced the real sky. He thought about Earth, which he would probably never see again. He thought about his grandfather. He thought about all the humans who had come before him, who had faced the dark and the cold and the hunger and had not given up. And he smiled, the same smile he had smiled in that classroom so many years ago, when he had laughed at the roar of death itself. Because humans had learned long ago that courage was not the absence of fear. Courage was the decision to move forward anyway. And that, more than anything else, was what made humanity special. Climbed down from the rocks slowly, carefully, never taking his eyes off the predator. The creature watched him walk toward the exit but did not attack. It seemed to understand that the hunt was over, that this time the prey had won. When reached the door, he turned back one last time. The predator had returned to its resting position. It was watching him still with those intelligent yellow eyes. Stepped through the door and it closed behind him. In the observation chamber, the Galactic Council sat in complete silence. No one clicked or hissed. No one made any sound at all. I accept, said. The chamber erupted again, but this time it was louder. Some representatives seemed shocked by his quick agreement. Others nodded as if they had expected nothing less from a human. Was led from the chamber. He did not know when the test would come. He did not know how much time he would have to prepare. But as he walked through the corridors of the station, he felt something that surprised him. He was not afraid. He was ready. Selected the most important recordings and prepared them for presentation. As he worked, he understood something that the council needed to learn. Fear of a predator was honest fear. You could see it. You could fight it. You could survive it. But fear of hunger, of disease, of your own weakness when facing the indifference of nature, that was a different kind of fear. That was the fear that shaped a species at its deepest level. When finished, he had 5 hours left before his time was over. He did not rest. Instead, he prepared his words, thinking about how to explain to the most powerful beings in the galaxy why his species laughed at the roar of a predator. "Ye things that do not roar," said, "the things that wait, the things that cannot be fought with weapons." Professor was quiet for a very long time. Then he nodded slowly, as if understanding something that had been hidden before. "You will come with me to the Galactic Council," Professor said. "They will want to hear this. They will want to understand how a human can laugh at the roar of death itself."